Good afternoon.
But good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Grants 101 for Georgia's Local Officials webinar series, a 12-part webinar series brought to you by GMA and the Georgia Association of Regional Commissions. This is, I want to say, the 10th. It's kind of hard to keep track now. The 10th webinar in this series. I'm Claire Chan with the Georgia Municipal Association, and we're actually delighted to have a special guest on today's webinar, Sarah Tolchin. Sarah serves as the Grants and Legislative Aide in Senator Ossoff's Washington, D.C. office. She has been with the Senator's office since January 2023 and in her current role since May 2023. She received her undergraduate degree from the University of Michigan and is originally from Sandy Springs, Georgia. So I wanted to introduce everyone to Sarah and allow her to make a few remarks at the start of the program. Sarah, do you want to unmute?
Yes, thank you so much, Claire, and for GMA for having me. I'm so happy to be here with you all. And I saw some familiar names in the chat who I've talked to before, so great to be with y'all again. I really just wanted to say a few things on behalf of the Senator's office. Since his election into the Senate, he has championed passage into law of the historic bipartisan infrastructure law. Since being signed into law in late 2021, he has worked to ensure that the BIL has been implemented with Georgia in mind. We've already seen billions of federal dollars coming home to the state for infrastructure projects. We've been upgrading roads and bridges, highways and seaports, getting lead pipes out of drinking water systems. And the BIL kind of delivers funding in two key ways, with competitive grant programs for which localities and cities and counties can apply for, and then formula funding as well. And our office is really here to work with you all to identify what grant opportunities may work for your needs and then help you kind of throughout that process. So in my role, I work with cities, counties, development authorities, and organizations all throughout the state to help Georgia access as many federal resources as possible, which is one of the Senator's very top priorities. We can help flag new grant programs that open up that might be relevant to your projects and connect you with federal agency staff when needed. I also coordinate letters of support from the Senator and additional advocacy for grant applications as well. And of course, we can never guarantee success, but as the Senator says, we can always guarantee our very, very best effort. And by the end of this webinar, I definitely want to make sure that you all have my email address and phone number. So please don't hesitate to reach out if there's anything that our office can do to help or anything that I personally can do, or even just to introduce ourselves. I'm really looking forward to working together.
Thank you for those remarks, Sarah. And we here at GMA are so grateful for our partnership with you and the Senator's office, and also very grateful to the ongoing work that the Senator is doing to support Georgia cities and unlocking that funding for that very critical funding for infrastructure and other important efforts that matter to cities. So thank you for being on today's call. I know you'll be sticking around throughout the hour, and we'll stay for a few additional minutes after the webinar ends or after Amanda and Kimberly's presentation to answer any questions. So we hope that, if anyone has questions brewing, keep those with you so that Sarah, Kimberly, and Amanda can address those at the end. So before I continue before I hand it over to Amanda and Kimberly, I just want to remind everyone that you are participating in this webinar in listen-only mode. So we encourage you to use the chat and the Q&A functions in Zoom. If you would like to submit a question for any of the presenters, you can use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, your Zoom window. And if you'd like to add a comment, please use the chat function. Materials from today's webinar, as well as past webinars, will be available on GMA's website and posted as links in the chat as well. And you'll receive a follow-up email if you registered for this webinar. So without further ado, I want to pass it over to Amanda Day and Kimberly Hayes Demuga of Heyday Services for what I'm sure will be another very informative webinar. Amanda and Kimberly, take it away.
Well, thank you. We are thrilled to be here. And in
advance of what we think might be some extra questions today, given our special guest and the topic. If we get toward the end, if you've been with us for a while, you know, we always have some resources and some things at the end. What we could do is maybe glide through those and go ahead and start taking those questions. But again, as Claire said, at any time, if you have questions, the Q&A is a great place to put those questions, because we will be looking at those. And while one of us is speaking, the other can be answering the question. And chat, I think we found, is a really good way to sort of share comments if you agree with something or something resonates with you, or you want to connect with other folks. I know that Amanda has shared several times with me and a few times during this series about how much how useful it was to connect with other folks and local government that were also seeking grants, because sometimes it can feel like you're alone, and sometimes it's just a part of what you do. Your other duties as assigned could include grants, so we're here for you. Today we wanted to jump into advanced research tools, mainly around federal and state grants, and by states we mean mainly focusing on the state of Georgia. But to walk you through, for some of you, there might be some things that are reviews, but we wanted to today include, you'll notice more screenshots. So this can really be a guide for you after this is over, so that you can go back and do these things on your own and get those results and see where you are. So yeah, this is what we look like, almost full length here. We're standing up and smiling. And it was also winter when this picture was taken, another favorite season for many folks. So if you've just joined us, Amanda and I have been doing this for a long time. And by this, I mean writing grants and raising money. Together, we have about more than 50 years of experience. We're both certified as grant professionals. We've trained a ton of folks and we love it. We love getting that good information out to people who are looking for that good information. Because sometimes there's some misinformation out there, and we're here to help you suss all that out. And if you want to just glide on to the next slide, we're making sure that we're all set up for recording, and I think we are, and if not, someone will tell us and we'll fix it. So we got some house rules. They're again, using the chat for connecting is great. Q&A, great for questions. GMA is going to get all those slides and resource guides out to you if you register for this webinar. And I'm thinking if you didn't register for this webinar, you're not able to access the webinar. So it's all going to come to you because you registered. And I think we've got confirmation that we are recording. And that recording will also be a part of what GMA will distribute to you. They also have archived this whole series. It's available through links in LinkedIn and also through their website. Just wanting to let you know, I think it's wonderful that they just want to get information out there to whoever can use it. So with that all underway, let's get to a myth-busting item here. Grants.gov is great, lots of information. It is not and should not be your only tool. Back in the day, I was thinking maybe that grants.gov would one day be the one-stop shop, the be-all, end-all. It kind of started that way, but each agency, federal agency, is so different. They're so big. There's so much going on. They have different needs around specific applications and programs. I would think of grants.gov as a great place to start. And they also have great and free information about navigating grants.gov, about managing federal grants and other things. They have videos on their website. They have blog posts that are available, and it's just a powerful search engine. But like a lot of powerful search engines, it can sometimes feel a little daunting, because sometimes when you have so many options to search at so many agencies, it can just feel overwhelming. So we're operating with the assumption that most of y'all have heard about grants.gov as a place to go in and search. But we also want to point out other ways to go in and search. And if you're new to grants.gov, you can set up like I would call it almost a personal account for free in grants.gov. Your agency must be registered in grants.gov in order to apply for federal grants. And I am blanking on the exact number of the webinar where we talked about this, but I want to say it was the second one, how to register for federal grants. So we've got you covered, so we're not going to backtrack today. It is a viable source, but let's go on and let's talk about some other ways that you can check out grants and find out where things are. A quick note before I start talking about reverse engineering, you can actually go into grants.gov and ask it to send you an email every day with every new grant that's open. It can be as easy as that. But as Amanda put in the chat, if you're looking for specific grants like transportation, public safety, health, and other things, we're going to explore ways to connect more deeply with those agencies and ways to see where funding is going in your state and local area and or in municipalities of similar sizes across the United States, sort of help you figure out some trends and ways that you can maximize that funding. So some sites here, as I said, usaspending.gov, we're going to talk about that with some screenshots, local government websites, signing up for e-news. I know, who wants a cluttered email inbox? Probably nobody, but if it's cluttered with actual good information, that's not cluttered at all. I have heard of folks, and I've advised some folks to set up, you can even set up a grants at whatever your county or city name is and go and make that the place where you sign up for these things, but you just have to remember to go in and check it. But I would say if you're feeling overwhelmed by a lot of information, you could set up a specific email, sign up for everything with any agency that touches the kind of work that you want done in your municipality or in your county. Although local papers are getting fewer and far between, they're a great source of what's going on. In Atlanta, I would call the Atlanta Business Chronicle one of our local papers, and it's a great source of seeing what's going on, who's doing what, buying, selling, trends, to also look at funding. And if you have, as a municipality, if you have established a foundation, again, we talked about this in an earlier webinar, but if you've established maybe a foundation around your library system or your police or fire department, know that you can also, through that foundation, apply for private funding. Again, it's not a decision to take lightly, but if you have already those kinds of things in place, then going to these local sources of news can also help connect you with some emerging foundations or funders or just philanthropic activity in general. So don't discount that at all. And also, I love, Amanda, this final bullet point that you put in here, call their grants person and share intel. It sounds really like spy thrillerish, but what we're talking about is just reaching out to other municipalities. I know that it can feel sometimes like grants are kind of like, if you remember the Hunger Games, the book and movie series, right? Where it was like teenagers fighting to the death in some sort of dystopian future. Sometimes grants can feel like that you're hyper competitive and for you to win, someone else has to lose. But setting up these networks and getting in touch with people in neighboring communities, municipalities, and counties could possibly open the way for collaboration and getting larger funding to do even more transformative work. Because a lot of the issues that affect us all, clean water, safe roads and bridges, safe neighborhoods and communities, don't really stop at county or city lines. So I would encourage you to reach out and establish those networks. And I think this webinar series is a great way to do that. You can connect in the chat. And I know that GMA also holds a lot of different trainings and things throughout the year and places to come together and talk about that. So by reverse engineering, I'm suggesting looking at what's already out there and in municipalities or counties similar to your own and sort of seeing what they're doing and seeing if what they're doing can help you and what you want to do. Just giving you some options for that. And as we move on to the next slide, we wanted to... Oh, yeah, sure.
I was just going to say real quick, because if it's not already happening, when I worked for the city of Alpharetta, of course, we were right on top of the city of Roswell. Anytime it was in the paper that Roswell got something for their police department or their fire department, usually within about 2 minutes of that paper becoming live, the police or fire chief was at my desk going, well, I heard the city of Roswell got blah, blah, blah. When are we getting ours? And so I was like, well, let me see what I could do. So as you can imagine, I got to know Roswell's grant writer really well, because then I'd call him up and say, okay, tell me more about this grant. And usually he'd be like, here's the application, like his successful proposal, which made it even easier for me, right? And it worked both ways. He would do the same thing, like, hey, it was just in the paper. Y'all got money for a trail. How'd you do it? Let me know. So, it's on here and some people are like, yeah, whatever, but it really can work. So,
And it can also, I mean, there are going to be some people that are like, no, I'm not going to share. You're my competition. But there are going to be a lot of people who don't feel that way. And if someone's already got that grant, chances are it's a multi-year grant. Like Amanda said, if it's for trails or roads or bridges, it's not like they're going to turn right around in 6 months and go back to the same funder for the same thing. They already got theirs. So usually you can establish relationships and have those things shared. You can also get any federal grant application, particularly the winning applications, through the Freedom of Information Act. It can cost a little bit of money and take a while, but it is public information. So just know that you're not asking someone for their secret, like we're not asking for the Coca-Cola formula here. We're just asking folks to share. And if you're open to sharing, I think it'll make that much easier. So what we wanted to do was a brief but deeper dive into usaspending.gov. And again, not disrespecting the wonderful things that are available in grants.gov, but this is a better tool if you want to do that reverse engineering and see where that money is coming from and to whom. I think I have found that this is, I think Amanda, you would agree, this is a quicker way to do that. And again, it's a government sponsored website. You know that because it says .gov. And we printed out or did a series, excuse me, of print screens here to walk you through it. So this is what it looks like when you get there. And where you want to go first is the search award data, where the handy dandy red ovoid thing has just circled search award data. That's what you want to do. And if you're clicking on that, we'll go on to the next screen, and that's what you're going to see. And if you're asking yourself, why aren't they demonstrating this live? We could, but what we have found is that when we provide screenshots, it moves slightly slower, and you're able to see it, and you're able to use these slides as a reference instead of trying to remember a bunch of clicks and mouse activity during a live presentation. So here we are on the usaspending.gov, and you're getting ready to search awards, and you'll see over on the left-hand side, you can search different fiscal years and other items using filters. So here's what I'm going to tell you. If you can buy the pair of shoes that you really want on Zappos or Amazon or DSW, not that I shop for shoes a lot and know these things, if you are able to find the book you want or the plane ticket that you want online, those are transferable skills, and you can use them for usaspending.gov and any other platform that we're talking about. It's just about digging down to the things that really make sense to you. I know Amanda and I would recommend, when you're looking at time periods, I would not want to know what's my neighboring county gotten in federal grants since y'all started tracking grants. I mean, it could be interesting, nerdy exploration time, but you really want to look at more current things, maybe in the past 3 to 4 years. Certainly, if you're looking for BIL funding, you want to really narrow that window to just help you see what the trends are. So we've talked about the filters and the time period, and then when you do, moving again to the next screen, when you do narrow that down, you want to keep going on your filters, and you want to look at award type. We're talking about grants, which is why we're recommending you check the one that says grants. And in particular, I would, and again, we've broken down the many different kinds of federal grants in past webinars. I'm just going to very, very quickly highlight this. Block grants and formula grants are generally things that are coming from the federal government at a predetermined rate or a predetermined bucket of money. And that determination could be based on demographic data or different kinds of issues and data around incidence and prevalence of specific diseases or crimes or incidences. So block and formula grants are usually not where you as a municipality or county are going to be able to go for that grant. I would recommend looking at project grants. and maybe cooperative agreements. Cooperative agreements are like a first cousin of grants, but they're more where the federal government is really driving a specific issue and response to that. And they almost like want you as a contractor versus a grant where you're like, y'all want to talk about mental health or safe drinking water? We need this to be fixed because this is a big issue in our community. And here's how we're going to fix it. That's like a grant approach, as opposed to if the federal government had like a specific issue and a specific way or existing program that they wanted to use, and they're sort of looking for municipalities and counties as subcontractors. That's a very quick and dirty explanation, but I would recommend checking on project grants and cooperative agreements. Amanda, is that kind of where you are with this? Yeah.
Yep.
So let's scoot on down to our next slide and we'll walk you through that. So
Oops.
that's okay. We'll just leave them right there. We'll just talk
Okay.
about little red ovals. So obviously location, you can, I know in an example coming up, Amanda picked a specific Georgia county to look at. If you may have counties in mind that could be neighboring counties, that could be cities or municipalities in different parts of the state, but that maybe share your size or your demographic makeup, or rural versus suburban versus urban. That's sort of your call, but I would say when you're comparing locations, I would recommend to pick a location, whether it's in Georgia or in another state, that does share some things in common with you, whether it's geography or those demographic factors, so that you get more of an apples to apples approach of what's happening. And then when you're looking at recipients, I would say, Amanda, what do you think would be the best way to handle this? Like looking at going down to local government?
Yeah, because if you put location, like let's say you put, Fulton County,
Yep.
Georgia, it's going to pull every recipient located in Fulton County, every nonprofit, every school, K-12, every university. And if you're like, that's great, I'm glad Georgia State got some money, but as a city, that's not going to help you, right? So if you really want to know what the county government or the city government got, it's not just location, but you want to put the recipient's name there to get their awards and filter out everything else.
If you're in a more rural county, and maybe, maybe you would be interested to see, which colleges and universities are getting funding, who's just getting funding in general.
True.
You're in a more populous county, that will save you a lot of time if you just step on down to local government. Check that box down at the bottom, and then we'll just keep going on what happens next. And we've just talked about recipient type, and those are pretty self-explanatory, and award amount. So if I were you, I would not be interested in grants that are under $1,000, right? There are not very many of them, and you still have to manage them. And I would say that knowing your priorities and having an idea of the price tag, and then choosing that award amount accordingly. For example, if it's going to cost you $1 million to fix some stormwater issues, I really wouldn't want to, me personally, everybody's different. I, as working on grants in your municipality, I wouldn't really want to mess with anything under 6 figures. And that's just me, because I want to get the biggest bang for the buck to bring in the most money to fix the problem, instead of setting up, 7 or 8 grants of smaller amounts. I'd rather find that good match that best fits the big program that I'm trying to fund. So I hope that makes sense in driving your choices. Also, federal grants do come with a lot of reporting requirements, so you want to make it worth your while. That's just my take on it. If you're going to bring in federal money, it can do a lot of good, incredibly transformative, but no one just sends you a check and says, have a nice day, send us a picture when you've built your bridge. So there's a lot going on with it. So I would recommend finding the best fit and thinking that through.
Yeah. And I will say too, there's no magic dollar amount. Like where I worked, we decided if it involved federal construction, especially because construction just is a lot of hoops, we wanted at least $1 million to make it worth our time. I've had some clients that they won't touch construction projects unless it's $2 million, because they're a smaller agency and it takes so much of their time away that they're like, we really need it to be enough money to make it worth it for us to not be doing other things. And there's neither is wrong and neither is right. It's just you have to decide where your pain point is. And sometimes you don't know until you've done a project. That's how we came to the $1 million mark. One of my first trail grants, we got $300,000, which I was over the moon for. I'm like, $300,000. This is
A
amazing.
lot of money.
But by the time it was all said and done, our engineering department was like, it would have been cheaper if we'd done it ourselves because we had to jump through all the federal rules. So that's when we were like, okay, so let's talk about what's worth it. So sometimes it's a learning curve.
And it could go the other way too. I just want to
Yes.
super briefly, like, I'm drawing a blank on the exact name of the grant, but as a part of BIL, there was a grant cycle where they were funding energy efficiency in nonprofits. And if you had a shelter of some kind or a nonprofit that was maybe serving folks in the attached with the criminal justice system in your area, $100,000 grant could save them tens of thousands of dollars a year in energy costs. So we're not saying, oh, it has to be $1 million or you shouldn't even write it. We're saying, take a look at what's out there and look at with the lens of what you most need. And $100,000 could be a transformative grant for a nonprofit. It may be a drop in the bucket for a larger city like Savannah or Macon or Columbus when they're looking at huge projects. So we're just talking about economies of scale. And to
Absolutely.
wrap up this section, we just wanted to do a quick search and we're just gonna roll through these slides. We chose Lawrence County, not because I happen to know people that live down there. Amanda actually chose it. And hey, here we
My
are.
best friend's name is Lauren, so I was like, sure, we'll go there.
Hey, search logic at work. So just, and again, if you're from Lawrence County or know someone there, we're just choosing this county as an example. So again, our search parameters here that we went through were the 2023 looking for project grants. We talked about that. The location, Lawrence County, the recipient, Lawrence County, recipient type, local government. Okay. Could have easily been a city. Could have easily been a city.
Yeah.
And here's what it looks like for your results. And so I just want to direct your attention. I was starting to point at my screen and I'm so glad I stopped myself because that's so crazy. I use my hands a lot and that's not helping y'all. So when you look at the heading spending by prime award and you look down there, you see a screen capture. And again, this is a print screen, but this is what it would look like your results. And you can click on any of those things in blue, the award ID on the first column to the left to give you information of what they got and what they used and what it was for. And again, this can be super helpful for you when you're trying to determine where is funding or where are people getting their money to fund their programs, or what are similar counties to mine? What is it looking like for them? Particularly if you're starting out fresh, and particularly if someone's coming to your desk and breathing down your neck and going, well, we need this money. Why don't we have this money? And it's helpful to go, okay, this county got this money. Here's what it looks like. Here's where it came from. Here's how much money, and diving in and finding out how could that work for you. It could also be a way to foster collaboration. If they are successful in getting grants, maybe there's a way for your counties or municipalities to, again, work together. You can ask for more money and get more done across county and municipality lines. So planting that seed out there. Amanda, is there anything else you wanted to add to this?
I've got another, it's the same screen, just further over, so you can really see not only how much money they got, but who it's coming from. So
Exactly. So again, with print screens, I'm sorry, I should have explained that. You can only see part of it. So she zipped over with that bar, and then you can see, here's the awarding agency, here's what it was for. Maybe looking at some airports help out there, improving some infrastructure. Department of Justice, I'm sure that these are not surprise agencies that would be funding counties for important work. But again, helping you, giving you the tools that are free and out there and public information to help you figure out where the money is going and where there might be some good fits for you.
Yep. And how this stays current, there's a federal law, let's see if I remember. It's called FFATA for short because we like our acronyms, right? Federal Funding Accountability and Transparency Act. So that's FFATA. So the rule is if you get money directly from the feds and then you subaward it to anybody, you have to go in and report, hey, we've given a subaward to Lawrence County for this amount. And then every month, Lawrence County would go and report data on that. So this is only as current as people keeping up with their monthly grant reports. So as you can imagine, there's probably some backlog on some places. It's not going to be 100% up to date, but it's fairly decent as keeping you up to date on those things. So that's if you have to report on FFATA and you're like, why do we have to do this? Well, here's why. It makes all this information available to everybody. Yep. Can we do it? This is my fun fact of the day. Let's see it in the chat. The prizes, you're the winner. But FFATA was created back in, oh gosh, how many years ago was it? I have to do my math. It's after 2000. But two senators on opposing sides of the aisle co-authored this bill and then later ran against each other for president. You might want to take a wild guess what Democrat and Republican. So they were both senators and then they both ran for president.
Pop that in the chat. Look at you, Trivia Queen.
Trivia Queen. So we can keep going, but we'll just see if anybody can guess the random knowledge that is from being a grant person. I got to trot out my knowledge when nobody at the dinner table at my house cares about this stuff. So
we care, Amanda, and if no one responds, we know you'll tell us.
True story. So let some folks know. Okay, so as we're getting onto the slide, I'm going to ask Sarah to so kindly, this is a great point for her to put in the chat, her contact information. So she works for Senator Jon Ossoff. So when I'm covering information on the slide, I am specifically talking about Sarah and those who are in the same role that she's at in other offices. So, but another way to do grant research is to put your elected officials to work for you. Okay, so I'm going to start at the top, your federal level. So every state has 2 senators, and then we have multiple representatives. It varies from state to state, right? But at every senator's office and representative's office, they are going to have somebody on staff who handles grant things, right? They may do a million other things as well, but grants is going to be part of the work that they do. And so if you've never done it before, you want to reach out. So you're going to want to reach out to Senator Ossoff's office, which is going to be Sarah. You're going to want to reach out to Senator Warnock's office. And then if you don't know, you're going to want to figure out who is your your federal representative. Okay. And we did part of the resource guide. We've got a link that helps you find them because you really want to do it based on where the project's taking place. So, you may be working in a city that it's possible your city could be split. You may have 2 different representatives that cover your jurisdiction depending on, or your county. Can happen. So you want to make sure you find out wherever the project's happening that you want, that's whose office you're going to want to reach out to. And my recommendation is the first time you call, don't call and be like, hey, I need help. It's, we're all people, so we want to build relationships. So it doesn't hurt to just call and introduce yourself and say, hey, I would like to speak to the person on your staff who handles grants. They're going to put you through to whoever they are and just, hey, this is who I am. This is who I work for this city or this county. We've been doing some great things over the years. I'm probably going to be reaching out at some point to get some help. They are oftentimes located in Georgia. And so I have invited them to come before, like, hey, do you have time let's meet up for lunch one day. I'd love to drive you around our city and show you some of the things we got going on. Not a bad idea. If they are busy, they'll let you know, but if not, they'll come and check it out. But the things that they can do for you is they can help with support letters to federal grants. So if you're working on a federal grant and you want a support letter from your senator, you want to call that staff person and they'll help work with you to make that happen. Again, don't call them 2 days before the grant's due. As soon as you figure this out, you want to call and give them some time because, senators are kind of busy. So we got to make sure we can get into their schedule. Another thing that they can do for you is help with grant research. I have called before and said, hey, I'm trying to fund project XYZ. I've looked all over grants.gov. I've looked here. I can't find anything. Can you help me? And staffers have done research and come back and said either, yeah, here's some current opportunities. One time I had someone go, the only thing I could find were some programs that haven't been funded in 10 years. you know, maybe we should talk to our senator about if there's a way to bring this funding back to life, or maybe you can talk to somebody else about it. So at least I was able to go back to my mayor and council and go, not only did I look and not find anything current, Senator so-and-so's staffer looked and they can't find anything current either. So I promise I really did do my job, right? So they can do things like that for you. And Sarah, if you've got questions specifically for Sarah, certainly throw those in the chat. Or Sarah, if there's anything else I didn't cover that you specifically help with, feel free to unmute yourself and jump in here. But if we're good, that's fine too. We're
Oh,
good.
but
Okay.
again, before we go, someone
Yeah.
did put an answer in the Q&A to your trivia question.
Oh, they did. Let's see here.
Down over there, let's see.
I don't. Oh, hang on. I don't see anything in the webinar chat to.
No, in the Q&A.
Oh, in the Q&A. I didn't look there. You see Q&A. Kathy is the winner. Yes, Senators Kane and Senator Obama are the co-authors of FFATA. So,
Hey, Kathy.
yes, smart lady. Okay. Another thing. So we talked about at the federal level, but also your state elected officials can do similar things, right? Because we have state funded programs. And so again, those offices can help with telling you about grant programs you don't know about, writing support letters and different things like that. So don't just think at the federal level, if it's state funding you're going for, that can be another resource. Also your local elected officials. And what I would say here is they can help champion things for you, right? It's, you know, you can write a great grant, but if your mayor has a connection with Senator so-and-so and lets them know, hey, we've submitted this, you know, this is how it's going to help the community. This is how many people it's going to help. Those kinds of things can help give sometimes your application a little oomph. I'm not saying it's always going to give you a guarantee of a win, but it never hurts to have people doing those things. So don't be afraid to put even your local officials to work for you, building those relationships with folks. So those are some ways that you can help with finding grants and also hopefully helping with grants be more successful. So let's talk about also building your own network. Okay. The way I often find out about, especially grants that are specific for cities and counties, is building my network of people who do a job just like I do. And ways I've met other grant professionals, specifically in local government, is professional organizations. And we're going to, the next slide, I'm going to share you some specific organizations that have really helped both Kimberly and I when it comes to building our grant network. But think about different professional organizations that you could be a part of, because they can be grant related, but they also could be kind of project specific, right? Like if you are on here and you're a police officer that write grants for your police department. So getting, you know, going to like, I know there's any sort of Georgia state law enforcement training or membership organizations, joining things like that will help you meet the other officers who are like you. They're a police officer, but on top of their normal duties, they're writing grants to keep things funded. So if you can meet people who are really niche down to exactly the work you're doing, that can really help you because you can share like, hey, I found this grant. Have you heard of it? And hey, I found this one. So that can be a very helpful way. Online communities can be extremely helpful. So if you don't have, you're like, that's great, but we don't have the money for me to go to conferences. Well, okay. Well, is there some free online communities where you can share information and meet other people doing the same work that you're doing? Even your local organizations may be helpful. You know, I've worked before with the local K-12 school system grant writer. There have been a couple of times where we've been able to come together either on joint applications, or maybe it's just I need a letter of support from the school system or maybe I need some data from the school system that'll help make my proposal better. So finding some of the people locally who are doing the same thing you are, your area nonprofits, those can be helpful. And if you can't find an organization that suits your own needs, start making your own. I would argue that the people who are showing up week after week on this call, if if GMA kind of share, I know there's permissions about sharing things, but if there can be a way that you all can stay together, whether it's an email listserv or whether it's just whatever it is, because you are all doing the same thing, right? And so having that group that you can reach out to and call onto for help is going to make your life so much easier. When I first got to the city of Alpharetta, I had been there like 2 days when Roswell's grant writer called me up and introduced himself. And he was like, I am so glad you're here. Cause he's like, I felt like I've been the only grant writer my entire life. So he was like, we're going to have lunch. So Danny and I had lunch. And we were like, we need to find other people like us. So we kind of started nosing around and we found 3 other grant professionals that worked in Metro Atlanta specifically for local governments. And the 5 of us, for the longest time, we met once a month. We called ourselves, it was unofficial, but we were like, we are the Georgia Government Grant Writers Association, because it's what we are. And we would take 2-hour kind of lunch and learns where we would sit and talk about grants and then also just get to know each other better. And those 5 people, we were each other's lifeline for a long time, but it was just so helpful because not only were they writing grants, but they were writing grants for government agencies in Metro Atlanta. And so they understood the things that I was going through. So if you can't find a grants group, create your own. I'm telling you, it really can work. So a couple of networks that Kimberly and I have found helpful that we wanted to share with you. There is a grant organization called the Grant Professionals Organization, and they have chapters throughout the country, including one in Georgia. So some helpful things about GPAs, they do have Grant Zone, which is their online forum. It is free if you are a member of GPA. So you'd have to join that first, but memberships, what is it, Kimberly, like $225 a year, something around there? It's not overly expensive, but I understand when pennies count. So I will say the Georgia chapter, you can participate in the Georgia chapter for free. They don't require you to be a member. And so it meets virtually the 4th Tuesday of every month at 10 o'clock. And so if you've never checked them out, we've got the website there. Highly recommend that group. That's where I've met. And in fact, this is how I met Kimberly, was through GPA. Another great resource is LinkedIn. Start following other folks who do what you do. So, because they're going to be posting information about grants they've won or grants they're interested in. So that is a great, helpful way. And on the resource guide, Kimberly and I are sharing our LinkedIn pages. So feel free, we're not, so you don't have to follow us by any means, but we share a lot of information. So if we can be helpful to you in that way, please definitely connect on LinkedIn. Obviously, the Georgia Municipal Association has a great website with resources, so you want to pay attention to that, as does the Georgia Association of Regional Commissions. They post their grant projects list. So that's another great way to do a reverse search to see who got money and where that came from. And again, consider forming your own community if you need to. Another way I have done grant research before is by looking at federal appropriations bills. So every year, each federal department has to create their appropriations bill. This is how our budgets get built. And so within those bills, you can see what grant programs exist and how much money is being allocated to those bills. And the nice thing is you can see them in draft form. So you can even see them before the budget year has happened, before they even get approved. Now, they can obviously change from, before they get adopted. But this is an early way to kind of see what programs are coming back, what new programs are being proposed. And so I've got the link here on the slide. This is where you can go. This is the specific bill I looked up. So what I did was I just Googled fiscal year 2024, Department of Homeland Security. And within that document at the top, I searched the word grants, and I found under the Federal Emergency Management Agency section, it says that they're going to set aside, let me see, that's $3,742,000,000 for grants, contracts, cooperative agreements, and other activities. Okay, so already I know this is just FEMA, which is just a subpart of Department of Homeland Security. So this is the link to that specific bill, and I just have some screenshots to show you. So underneath that paragraph, I just read where all that money comes. Now it's just a listing of all of the different grant programs. And so you can see here, there is, for this fiscal year, $530 million set aside for the State Homeland Security Grant Program. And, I know this because I've done this a lot of time, but if you can't find that, it's a state program. So you want to, for us, it would go to GEMA, the Georgia Emergency Management Agency. So this is a great program if you've never gone through it before. For police and fire, it's basically an equipment grant. And I've bought a lot of equipment through this grant. So you can go to GEMA, check out their page and see what you can find. Then you also have the Urban Area Security Initiative, which is UASI. So that goes to larger metropolitan areas. This one here is the Assistance to Firefighters grants. So even if you're like, I don't know where this is, you know it's money through FEMA. So worst case scenario, you can mosey to FEMA's website. You can type in Assistance to Firefighters grant because now you know the title of the grant program, and you can find out about when the next application is, who's eligible. You can start reading all those details. So again, a lot of this information also in grants.gov, but it's not going to appear there until the proposal is open or almost open, right? Here's where you can find out about some things very quickly. And I'm not saying every year you got to go and comb through every RFP or every appropriations bill, but it is an option to be able to find stuff you're looking for, especially if you're trying to plan ahead with your grant funding for the year. And another advice I would give is, especially for smaller cities, and even when I was in Alpharetta, which we're no Atlanta or Macon or Savannah, but decent sized city, I more often would go to state agencies for my grant applications than federal agencies because it's not going to be nearly as competitive, right? I'm only competing within my state versus across the entire country for money. And I'm more likely to get to know the funders better. Like I really got to know that the Homeland Security grant, I really got to know my project manager. And so anytime I had a problem, I would pick up the phone and just call and be like, hey, friend, I have a question about this year's grant application. And that person was going to pick up the phone and answer it every time because we had built up a relationship, right? So you have easier access to your funders. Oftentimes you have a lot more hands-on assistance. Federal agencies do training webinars, but they're usually, kind of more of that 10,000 level, versus the state ones can get more specific. And again, because you know them, they're usually more apt to answer more specific questions for you. Usually the application is less complicated. The portal is usually, not always, but less complicated. So it's not as heavy a lift as submitting a federal grant proposal. Okay. And it's often very easy to make connections with your state elected officials so they can kind of help, maybe do a letter, do support, do those kinds of things. So I'm not saying don't ever go for a federal grant because there's so much federal money out there and there's a lot of federal money that can go to great programs. But I'm just saying if you're new to this and you're a little overwhelmed about doing your first grant as a federal proposal, you may really want to think about looking at state grants as an option. Okay. And if you're like, great, so federal agencies have grants.gov, what's our state site? Sadly, we don't have one right now. There is not a Georgia grants.gov. I keep talking to my local representative, telling them they need to do that, and they have bigger fish to fry at the moment, I guess. So maybe one day we will have this, but until then, the best way to do your research is you need to go to each of the state agencies' different websites. And one of the links in the resource guide is a listing of every Georgia state agency. So if you're like, I don't even know who's out there, you can check them all out. Not every single one of them gives grants, but plenty of them do. So what you want to do is you want to dive into the websites of the different agencies. If they have a way for you to sign up to receive email updates or newsletters, I highly recommend. I'm one of these, I'd rather get all the emails and not miss anything than the other way around. And so sign up for those things. Anytime they offer trainings, whether in person or online, meetings to talk about things, go. Because you're going to learn some new information. They're going to put a name with a face. They're going to realize, oh man, they must really need this. They're here. They're taking the time to show up. So it's always important to go to those things. And then also I would encourage, and Allison's asking where the list is. One of the things when Claire sends the follow-up email that sends the copy of the slides, the resource guide is with that. And it'll also be on that link I put in the page that has all the previous webinars we've done. All of that information is online. So you'll get that. I would also encourage your elected officials to get involved where possible, right? Because for instance, the regional commissions, they are run by a board, and those boards often have people that are elected officials that sit on there. So for the Atlanta region, the Atlanta Regional Commission, I just heard that Mayor Andre Dickinson, Atlanta's mayor, is now the chair of the Atlanta Regional Commission. that is fantastic for the city of Atlanta because they're going to be the first to know all kinds of things. And so but I mean, that's just one seat. The board is a pretty big board. And so I was forever encouraging my mayor to sit on things like that. The state Homeland Security grant that goes through the Georgia Emergency Management Agency, they broke the state into regions and they have a council. They call it the All Hazards Council for each region. My police chief for a while sat on that All Hazards Council. That helps to get money. I mean, they do a good job of divvying it out, but again, oftentimes it's having the right person in the right place to know the right thing. And so encouraging both your elected officials and some of your key staff, if they have the opportunity to sit on a board that has anything to do with grant funding, it certainly does not hurt your chances. So those are the kinds of things I will say. Okay. Whew. We zoomed through all that, but I wanted to leave questions, especially at the end, not only for Kimberly and I, but for Sarah, if you have questions about how all of those things work. So yes, Allison, the state grant funders, it's in the resource guide that you will get after this session. So that's, I'm assuming that's the list that Tanya was also talking about, following along in the chat. I don't see anything in the Q&A, but let's add questions to. Oh, and I guess I should say too, for those who are new, Kimberly and I do have a podcast. It's called Fundraising Heyday. Every episode's absolutely free. And each episode we try, or each webinar we do, we try to pull out episodes that specifically tie back to the topic we're thinking about or we're talking about. And so if you want to learn more about prospect research and different things like that, we've got some great resources here. And I will also point out, even though we didn't specifically talk about this, oftentimes at smaller cities, even your mayor and council may get involved in this. So we interviewed, she was the mayor of Jonesboro, who wrote tons of grants. And yes, you may notice the last name also happens to be my mother-in-law. So of course I think she's fabulous. But she did a ton of grant writing for the city of Jonesboro because they just didn't have the staff to do it. And she thought, you know what? Part of why I ran for mayor is I wanted new parks and I wanted new sidewalks and some things like this. So I'm going to do it. And she figured it out and she brought millions of dollars to her city. And she will tell you on that slide, she's like, if I could figure it out, or on that podcast episode, if I can figure it out, you can too. So might be a great one to listen to. But Kimberly, anything I overlooked?
I don't think so. I would encourage folks, if you have questions, to think about them. I'm going to assume that people are thinking about questions maybe before they type them in. At this point, I'm looking to see, we've got maybe 30 folks on the line. We could, even if you want to, if that's okay with everyone else, we could ask people if they would want to unmute themselves and ask the question. We have a few minutes left.
I don't think on webinar they can unmute. I could be wrong. But
so you may
yeah.
want to either put them in the chat or put them in Q&A, and we'll just find out, because it's amazing that Sarah is here. Sarah, if you wouldn't mind, could you put your contact information in again into the chat so that people can have that incredible resource? I think it speaks a lot to the involvement of Senator Ossoff's office and making sure that grant money flows where it needs to flow. So don't be shy. And if you may prefer to just reach out to her by email or phone, and I'm sure that's fine too. And someone earlier, Amanda, wanted to be in your lunch bunch that meets, and I know that I don't think they meet any longer, but Kimberly, you could form your own lunch bunch and get together. So it's just an open invitation to congregate and figure out some ways to work together.
Yep.
Hey, everyone, can I actually wanted to put two questions in, unless someone else in the audience has, or any of our attendees have any questions, they actually can, if they raise their hand, we can unmute them and allow them to speak. But I just wanted to ask you all two questions. One is, what is one thing you'd say you wish cities knew as they're like looking for grants to support the projects in their communities, if you had to kind of share one thing that you wish they knew? And secondly, what are some of the most common questions that you get, Sarah, to the senator's office And Amanda and Kimberly, as you know, consultants and with the clients that you work with, what are kind of like one common question that you often get from communities?
If you want, Kimberly, I'll take that first one. Like what I wish, especially what I wish I had known earlier on, is that you don't have to chase the money. For so long, it was just, I would get a newsletter. Hey, this grant just came out. It's due in 30 days. And we were scrambling to put, okay, how can we use this? How are we going to do it? And you can do that. And as in local government, there's so many grants that there are certainly tons of opportunities that are going to come your way through that kind of a method. But it feels like you're chasing your tail and you're spending time on things that maybe are needed, but maybe they're not the most important. And so it took me a while to learn I don't have to do that. I can pause for a minute. We can think about what are our highest priorities this year, and then go out and do the search and find the grant opportunities. And some of them, it may be like, hey, we need this, but the next grant cycle for the thing that matches it is not for 8 months. And that's okay. So then I just put it in my calendar so I know in 8 months, or better yet, can I see last year's application? Because they don't change very much. In fact, sometimes they don't change at all. And so I may be able to go ahead and start putting something, collecting some data, different things like working on partnerships, if that's a bonus point thing. There's things you can work on ahead of time. So I wish I had known that you can really plan for grants versus chasing the almighty dollar. So
Can I
Oh,
piggyback on that right quick and just say, as a consultant, usually I would have some clients not understand the depth of information and planning that's required to go after like a really robust state or federal grant to fund a human services related program. It was like, well, we want to put these two groups together to better serve people who are unhoused. But then if I'm asking, hey, what would that look like? How many people would that be? What are the qualifications to do that kind of work? Do you already have this in existence? Those are the kinds of things where people could often get stuck. It's like, well, the money's out there. We have this need. And unfortunately, you need to be able to go like into more detail, I guess is what I'm saying. Before to compete for these grants, you're going to have a program that's thought out. And having the time to do that is what is going to make your grant more compelling. I would say that.
And I can jump in too. I would say, I know this was in the slides, but definitely putting us to work. That is our entire purpose. And something that the senator says in every meeting he's in is that his number one priority is making sure that everyone in Georgia has access to these federal resources and making sure that his staff is the most responsive staff that we can be. So definitely, email, call me. I think I'm on almost every grants outreach blast there is. I get emails every day. We also can get emails from federal agencies early being on staff. So sometimes we'll get notice maybe a few weeks before a new grant gets posted. So we can, flag those early too. But definitely letting us know what projects you have on your horizon, and we can keep them on our radar as well and let you know as soon as a new program opens up. And I think another thing that not as many people know is that if you are unfortunately not, awarded a grant, most agencies provide debriefs, and you can reach out to them. They can either, depending on, their availability, give you a one-on-one conversation. But we can also send them questions from you guys to see why, that didn't succeed and what you could do to be better.
That's a great point. You can learn how to strengthen the proposal, because as we've said, a lot of these federal proposals are cyclical, and private funders do not have to give you that kind of feedback, but most state and federal agencies are required to do that. And as someone who's been a grant reviewer, you have to, and you can't just say, I give them a 1 out of 5, it's like, why? What things were missing? What things were unclear? And getting that information together can just make that proposal stronger. if you have time to be a grant reviewer, it can make you a better grant writer as well. But I'm
Yeah.
feeling like a lot of people don't have tons of free time, but if you do, that might be something to think about.
So it is 2:01 now, and unless anyone else does have any questions, I do want to just thank you all for taking the time to join this webinar, and thank you, Amanda and Kimberly and Sarah, for making yourselves available to share your expertise and resources with member cities, counties, regional commission staff, and anyone else who's taken time this afternoon to join the call. So as we've said throughout the webinar, these materials, including the recording of today's webinar, will be posted on GMA's website and sent out through email. So we hope to see you all back in, I want to say 2 weeks' time for the next Grants 101 webinar. So until then, hope everyone takes care and has a great rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.
Bye. And nice to meet you, Sarah.